It made me cry.
This One's Wife, ridiculed again. Once upon a time, it was the case for This One's Wife and Harry. It was wake up and, oh look, a deal, many millions of dollars. Oh, look at this, another deal for doing very little but being paid millions of dollars. Fantastic. Oh look, people want us to come and see them. Great, a tour there, a visit over there. Brilliant. Yeah, invitation to this event that we didn't have to pay for. Gosh, life is sweet. What's that? You want us to come to that event and we don't have to buy an award? That sounds jolly kind of you. We'll be there in a jiffy. But then, all of a sudden, it changed. And the Sussexes have found themselves on the receiving end of ridicule, and yet more ridicule. All based upon the way that they have behaved. They find themselves no longer being invited to certain events, and the only ones that they get to go to are ones where they have paid to attend. For instance, This One's Wife organising for Archwell to get paid for a slot for her to appear at the South by Southwest conference. That they've returned up at various events where awards have been paid for. That they only get to go to certain things where, for instance, in Griftus or Archwell have paid for it and they piggyback off the back of that particular charity. That South Park really went to town and ought to do so again. There's so much material that they could use. We really do need another episode. Family Guy got stuck in. Kevin Hart did so as well. Chris Rock has had things to say about them. And regularly they are lampooned across social media and have the piss taken out of them in mainstream media. Anybody with self-awareness would start to realise, do you know something? People think that we're a bit of a joke and they don't really invite us to anything anymore. We fucked up. But these two are the walking embodiments of a lack of self-awareness. Harry, because he's not very bright, her, because of her narcissism, cocooning her in a shell, whereby, although she knows that people don't like her, she rejects it. She is incapable of understanding that she is inherently unlikable. She is incapable of recognizing that she's eminently mockable as a consequence of what she wears, how she behaves, what she says. She just cannot comprehend it. And we have another example of the way that the pair have been ridiculed in relation to their behaviour. Hannah Ross reports for GB News. Prince Harry ridiculed in front of England rugby players over his and This One's Wife's gas-guzzling trips. Prince Harry was ridiculed in front of England rugby players over his and This One's Wife's gas-guzzling trips. The Duke of Sussex was mocked by former England rugby boss Eddie Jones about his stance on climate change while using private jets. Hypocrisy. While Harry watched an England rugby team's training session, Jones said, "How's climate change going, mate? How was Elton John's jet?" You can always rely, of course, on the Aussies to be straight talking, putting it straight to Harry, pulling no punches. But it's also indicative of, again, how far he has fallen. At one point, nobody would have raised such a matter with him because he did command a degree of respect. But now, he and This One's Wife are viewed as fair game. Any respect that they had as being members of the royal family has largely been eroded by their self-absorbed ways, their selfishness, their hypocrisy, their contrarian behaviours, so that an Aussie coach thinks that it is entirely fair and appropriate to point out this hypocrisy. He doesn't care for the fact that that might embarrass Harry. Indeed, he feels that it's appropriate to make this point. The Aussie coach was referring to when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had taken a private jet to Nice in 2019, despite having spoken out about climate change. The Duke used to attend training sessions in his former role as England's rugby patron and spoke to players. England ace Ben Youngs recorded the story on the For the Love of Rugby podcast with teammate Dan Cole. Young said, "You know, Prince Harry used to come in a little bit and watch us train. I don't know what we call him now. All of his titles have gone, haven't they? There was one time he was standing there and was saying something to the group, and then Eddie was like, 'How's climate change going, mate? How was Elton John's jet?' That was quite good." Young, who holds 127 caps for the England national team, joked that they had just chucked Eddie under the bus there, and Prince Harry. Harry was the patron of England's Rugby Football Union in 2016 and the Rugby Football League in 2017. But when he and this one's wife stepped back from their royal duties in 2020, he lost both roles. The Duke of Sussex regularly speaks out about the environment. In 2022, Harry spoke at the United Nations, see parts passim, addressing a global assault on democracy and freedom. At his keynote speech in New York City, where only half the chamber was full, he said, "We're living through a pandemic that continues to ravage communities in every corner of the globe, climate change wreaking havoc on our planet, with the most vulnerable suffering most of all. The few weaponizing lies," presumably he's talking about him and his wife at this point, "and disinformation," him and his wife again, "at the expense of the many, and from the horrific war in Ukraine to the rolling back of constitutional rights here in the United States." In 2020, Prince Harry also called for doing, not talking, to tackle environmental issues. He said, "For me, it's about putting the do's behind the says, and that is something that WaterBear is going to be doing, capitalising on a community of doers. There's a lot of people that say, but this is about action." Harry was recently criticised, along with that of this one's wife, for taking a private jet to Canada ahead of the Ingrifftus Games event in February. Thus, once upon a time, Harry was liked. He was indeed loved by many people. But since he's got involved with the spider and has turned into a ginger twat, it shows that the respect that he once commanded has been eroded, that he and his wife are seen as being hypocrites, and it's fair game to criticise them. Of course, neither of them like that. Her, because it's a threat to control, him, because of his petulance. But the fact is, it's demonstrable that the anecdote about this event is seen as fair game to repeat it. It's not a case of, we'll spare him some blushes, we won't talk about their hypocrisies. No, let's bring up an occasion where he was shown up by the coach. And it demonstrates that these two now, quite simply, as a consequence of their own actions, are simply figures of ridicule. And those are positions that they richly deserve. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.